Welcome into the Commanders Report mailbag. I am your host, Jack Sperry. Today, I am answering your questions on the Washington Commanders here in Week 8 as this team prepares to take on the Kansas City Chiefs on Monday Night Football here in the 8th week of the NFL season. Now, before we get into the questions today, make sure you click that subscribe button if you haven't already to join the most interactive Commanders fan community anywhere here on YouTube. We have daily Commanders community posts and polls for you guys to vote on this channel. We also give you guys daily, free, and informative Commanders content, I should say. So make sure you guys click that subscribe button if you haven't already. And we also do these mailbags on our live shows every single Wednesday where you guys have an opportunity to get your questions on the Washington Commanders on the show. So without further ado, let's show our first question this week, which comes from Malcolm Lloyd. It says, what's everyone's opinion on our rookie tackle? So Josh Conerly Jr. Certainly is taking his rookie lumps, which sucks because they really drafted him as the quote-unquote pro-ready tackle guy. You know, he was known as the technician, and he was known as the guy with quick feet coming out of Oregon, and he just hasn't been that. And, you know, he's been a walking mistake, quite frankly. He's gotten a lot of penalties. He's given up a lot of pressures. And even last week, you know, going up against Jadeveon Clowney, he was just clowning him. I mean, you know, pun intended, okay? Like, Josh Conerly Jr. gave up a sack, multiple pressures, multiple penalties. He wasn't good in run blocking either. He's been disappointing. But he's still young, right? He's still developing, and you're hoping that as the rookie season goes on and as he gets in the year 2 and in year 3, he becomes a legitimate starter here for the Washington Commanders. But, you know, I think a lot of people expected him to be a big part of a big revamp of this offensive line, and he was going to be able to come in and be, you know, a very steady piece right away. That's why they drafted him over a guy like, say, Josh Simmons, who has looked phenomenal for Kansas City when he's been playing for them. It's been disappointing so far, man, and hopefully he can get better. Then we got one from Beans Brigade who says, how much does the loss of Dorance Armstrong affect our defensive line? Quite a bit, man, because he was arguably your best and most effective defensive player on the team. And he had a ton of sacks. He was being disruptive against the run. He was winning the line of scrimmage. He was holding the edge, which was really important job for this Commanders defense and run defense. And now you're losing him. And not only do you miss him, but you're losing your other starting edge, Dietrich Wise, for the rest of the season. You don't have Javonte Jean-Baptiste, another rotational guy in this rotation. And you know, Preston Smith is unplayable. Jacob Martin, I thought, actually played pretty well versus the Cowboys last week. Von Miller has popped up in moments, but he hasn't really been an impact so far this year. Honestly, the way that I would address this position is, you know, they brought up Jalen Lane from the practice squad. I don't really want to play him that much. The way that I want the coaching staff to address this Beans Brigade is to put Frankie Louvu at defensive end. All right, he's technically an off-ball linebacker, but he's not very good tackling out in space, and he's not good in pass coverage. What he's best at is the stuff that pass rushers do. All right, getting after the quarterback. You know, pass rushing on the edge. You know, being a QB spy and being a cleanup player. You know, that's the way that I want this defense to use Frankie Louvu. And now that you have all these injuries at defensive end, it has never made more sense than now to play Frankie Louvu at that position. So that's what I would do. And honestly, I would bench Bobby Wagner as the other inside linebacker and completely overhaul your inside linebacker duo. Go from Frankie Louvu and Bobby Wagner, and I would play Jordan McGee and Ali Cahoe at the two off-ball linebacker positions while I move Frankie Louvu to defensive end, and while I move Bobby Wagner to the bench. So what say you guys? Let me know down there in the comment section. Should the Commanders move Frankie Louvu to edge? Give me yes or no down there in the comment section. I think it's a good idea. I think that Frankie, would be a good defensive end. Now he's a little bit undersized, so this is why I kind of want to go to a big nickel kind of defense, so that big nickel can help out on his side of the formation. But let me know what you guys think. For today's pinned question, YouTube's going to throw you an ad break here in just a few seconds. When that happens, take advantage of that time by giving me a yes or no. Got one from Blake. Says, what's your thoughts on drafting Carnell Tate in round 1 if we address defense in free agency? Listen, man, Carnell Tate's an awesome player. I would absolutely love to add him, but it's really, really early to talk about, draft stuff at this point. We don't even know, what the draft needs are going to be for the Washington Commanders. We have some idea. I'm guessing that wide receiver will be one of those positions that they look at. I kind of doubt they bring back Deebo Samuel next year. at this point. But there's multiple positions that they could add at, like cornerback. They could add a safety. They could definitely get inside linebacker. All right, defensive end might be a position that they're looking at as well. They might be looking at offensive line again. Like there's a lot of different positions that they're going to be looking at in the draft next year. But if they draft Carnell Tate in round 1, man, he's a hell of a player. To pair him up with Terry McLaurin, the 2 Ohio State boys, would be a hell of a combo for Jayden Daniels. Then we got one from Tricky Jacob, says, sign CJ Gardner-Johnson. We could definitely use a cornerback for more improvement for our defense. Yeah, man, and technically CJ Gardner-Johnson's a safety, but he has played a lot of nickel in his career, and he's played a lot in the slot. So, I think that if you want to embrace kind of a modern trend in the National Football League on the defensive side of the ball, with guys like Mike McDonald and Brian Flores and, even Bill Belichick towards the end of his career in the NFL. They played a lot of 3 safety packages. All right, Pittsburgh's doing this right now with Jalen Ramsey, who's a big nickel corner for them. CJ Gardner-Johnson can certainly fill that role for this defense, and, I think it could bring a much-needed element of physicality to this group that is desperately needed and is not there right now in the current state of the Commanders' defense. Then we got one from Vern. Says, how about going after Jakobi Meyers? He has asked for a trade. Listen, man, I want to get more young talent on this Commanders team, and I'm really not interested in trading another kind of higher draft pick on a 29-year-old wide receiver, and then your 3 starting receivers would all be 29 years old or older at that point. All right, Terry is around that 30 range as well. Same thing with Debo, and of course Jakobi will be turning 30 next year. So I don't know if I want to buy at the deadline, if I'm being completely honest, Vern, unless the Commanders win at least one of their next 2 games and there's something that makes sense. And hey, if the Raiders are getting rid of Jakobi Meyers for like a 7th-round pick or something and the Commanders can get him for that, all right, fine. He's a 1-year rental, whatever. But even then, like, you're giving up another, lottery ticket for a young player that could potentially work out. All right, if we traded our 7th-round pick this year, we wouldn't have gotten Bill Krosky-Merritt, right? Sometimes these picks do work out. So unless you really feel like you can make a run this year at some point, I just don't know if a Jakobi Meyers trade makes a ton of sense. He's a good player, and if the Commanders were winning more, I'd be all over this, Vern. But right now, it's not looking great for this football team, and because of that, I want to keep my draft picks. If anything, I want to sell players to get more draft picks for the future. Now, before we get into the rest of your questions here this week, let's have a word from our sponsor today at Prize Picks. And you and I make decisions every single day. But on Prize Picks, being right can actually get you paid. Don't miss any of the excitement this season on Prize Picks, where it's good to be right. Football season is finally here, and you better believe I'll be getting my Prize Picks lineups in all season long. Prize Picks is super simple to play. Just pick more than or less than on 2 to 6 player stat projections, and if you get your picks right, you could cash in. Prize Picks also puts their users first, so while withdrawals are fast, safe, and secure, Prize Picks also offers Venmo, Apple Pay, MasterCard, and more for quick and easy deposits into your account this football season. And a new feature from Prize Picks that I absolutely love is injury reboots. If one of your players leaves the game in the first half and does not return, Prize Picks will not count it as a loss. So for Thursday Night Football this week, I'm taking the less on passing yards for Justin Herbert, the more on Justin Jefferson receiving yards, and the more on rushing yards for Chargers running back Kamani Vidal. So download the Prize Picks app today on your phone for free. Use code CLNS to get $50 in lineups after you play your first $5 lineup. That's code CLNS to get $50 in lineups after you play your first $5 lineup. Prize Picks, it's good to be right. Got one from District Fanatic. Says, do you think JD5 will be healthy by week 9 since he will get rest this week? Sure hope so, man. Sure hope so, because, he is a dynamic playmaker for this Commanders team. He practically carried this team to an NFC Championship berth last year as a rookie, and he's still one of the premier quarterback talents in this league, in my opinion, okay? So whenever you can have him in the lineup, it's better. So hopefully he can play in week 9, especially if they lose this week versus Kansas City, because if you're sitting at 3-5 with a chance to go down 3-6 before the trade deadline, that might be the difference between the Commanders selling or maybe even potentially buying at the deadline this year. So hopefully they can win one of these next 2 games. Hopefully JD can get back for that week 9 matchup, because frankly, the Commanders are not going to have a huge chance of winning if A, their defense doesn't get a lot better in the next 2 weeks, or B, Jayden Daniels is not out there. So, we'll see what ends up happening there. District, certainly hope JD can get healthy soon. Then we got one from Joe Gibbs, who says, do you think our defensive problems are more of a personnel issue or a defensive coordinator issue? I personally put more blame on Joe, not going to lie. I would personally disagree with that, Joe. I would say it's more of a personnel issue. All right, I'm not sure if there's a ton of defensive coordinators that could have success with how slow the personnel in Washington is, okay? I don't care how good of a schemer you are. When you have a guy like Bobby Wagner out there that can't change direction, can't accelerate, and doesn't have good long speed either, like he's going to get destroyed against good offensive coordinators. There's really nothing you can do to hide a player like that at the off-ball linebacker position unless you blitz him literally on every play. And then even then, if you blitz him on every play, your defense is still being put in positions to fail, in my opinion, because the opposing offense knows what's coming. So, I think that with Marshawn Lattimore playing as poorly as he's playing, Mike Sainristil playing as poorly as he's playing, I'm not saying Joe has necessarily done a great job coordinating this defense this year, but it's just a fact that these guys on the field are just absolutely atrocious at this point. Now, part of that's coaching. Part of that is, maybe the coaching staff is not putting them in positions to succeed. Maybe it's the coaching points they're making in practice. Maybe it's a culture thing where they're not enforcing high standards, even though I personally don't think that's the case. I'm a believer in Dan Quinn's culture. But, I personally think the biggest issue with this defense, Joe, is that there's a lot of old people on it, and they can't run anymore, and they can't hang with all these younger, faster players that they're going up against and their liabilities. So until you get faster, until you get younger on this defense and you start shifting some things around in the personnel, I'm not sure if we're going to get like a legit look at whether this is Joe Whitt Jr.'s fault or whether this is just a personnel issue. So that's another reason why I think we need to make changes on this defensive rotation pronto. So make sure you guys click that thumbs up icon if you haven't already, if you are a real one. Really do appreciate you guys putting in your questions today. We still got a couple more, but if you appreciate the work that we put in every single week to give you guys daily and free Commanders content here on the show, click that thumbs up icon. It really does help out this video. All right, so now Malcolm Lloyd again here says, is it true about Maxx Crosby and the Cowboys? Probably clickbait, but do we have a shot? No, we're not trading for Maxx Crosby. I don't think we're going to make a trade for any veteran player, period, but the Raiders have apparently, and this was, I can't remember who had it yesterday. I think it was Pelissero had it this week, where he said that the Raiders sat down with Maxx Crosby and they told him to his face, we're not trading you, man. They just paid him a massive contract this offseason. He's locked up long term, and he's still relatively young. He's a foundational building block for them. So no matter how many times they reboot this kind of rebuild machine in Las Vegas, I don't think they're going to let go of Maxx Crosby, at least until that contract starts to wane down a little bit. So no, I think the Cowboys might have been interested in Maxx Crosby, but I highly doubt the Las Vegas Raiders are even entertained that. Maybe Jerry called him and said, hey, what do you think about Maxx Crosby? And boom, right? He just hung up the phone immediately because it just doesn't make any sense. So no, Malcolm, I don't think Crosby goes to the Cowboys, and he's probably almost definitely not coming to the Washington Commanders. Then we got one from J.R. Gomez. Says, do you feel we would be better served to go to man-to-man coverage? Zone is not working here. Frankly, J.R., nothing's working here. Marshawn Lattimore, Mike Sainristil, these guys are not good enough in man coverage to be able to go up man-to-man versus the best receivers in the league, plain and simply. And then, same thing goes for Bobby Wagner. Like if you play man coverage, Bobby Wagner's going to be one-on-one versus tight ends, and if they have an athletic tight end or, sometimes he's going to be matched up on a running back. I mean, remember that one play where he was matched up one-on-one versus Bijan Robinson? I mean, this is just what offensive coordinators are going to do. If you go to man-to-man coverage, then they're going to exploit the slow players that the Commanders have on the team. But, if you play zone, of course these guys are not instinctual enough to play zone, so they're going to get ripped up. So, I really don't see a solution to what the Commanders can do to get themselves better on defense other than getting the slow players off the field. All right, once you get the slow players off the field, then what I think you should do is you should run a very creative kind of zone blitz style of defense where you're shifting players post-snap. You're putting a lot of bodies close to the line of scrimmage to make quarterbacks kind of decipher, okay, who's coming on the blitz, who's not coming on the blitz, have them thinking about that, and then force them to read the defense post-snap. I think that's what a lot of the top defenses in the league do, especially the ones with limited personnel, especially in the secondary, because they're not good enough to just play man-to-man coverage, and they're not good enough to just play straight zone coverage either, so they're going to have to get creative to get some success on defense. Then we got one from Clay Thomas, says, who makes the most sense to trade or would even gain any trade interest? I would say the four guys that I would say are guys that some teams may want in a trade that the Commanders could be willing to let go of. I would say Dorance Payne, somebody that I would need a good draft pick for, but you can make an argument his trade price is never going to be higher, and he's getting older as well. Then you got Deebo Samuel, who's on a one-year deal. I don't think the Commanders are going to want to give another big contract to a player at his age. They already paid Terry a multi-year extension. I don't think they're going to want to pay another older vet next offseason. Andrew Wiley, teams are always looking for offensive line help, and Wiley can play either right guard or right tackle. And then Zach Ertz, if the team is done, if they're sitting at 3-6 and their season is done in 2 weeks, and a team offers me a 6th or 7th round pick for Zach Ertz, who might be in the final year of his career, I think, getting another lottery ticket is worth it. So I would say those are probably the four guys that teams could be interested in that the Commanders could realistically trade away. I would say the one that has to be the most expensive is Dorance Payne, but everyone else I'm probably willing to give up for a mid to late day 3 draft pick. With Dorance Payne, I probably need at least a day 2 draft pick to let go of him. Good question, Clay. All right, so coming up is our next weigh-in question here, guys. Give me your confidence level in the Commanders to turn this season around. Put it on a scale of 1, meaning they're done, season is over, no confidence at all, to 10, meaning they're going to turn it around and they're going to compete for a Super Bowl this year. Let me know your scale of 1 to 10. What number is your confidence level in this Commanders team to turn the season around? That'll be it for this week's mailbag here on the Commanders Report. Thank you guys so much for stopping by here today. Thank you to everybody that tuned in on the live show this week to submit your questions. And until next time, guys, hail to the Commanders.